Hello and welcome to episode 9 of this series of chess game via test-driven development. Starting off here once again with the same sort of thing I've done the last several times, which is to tidy up the to-do and maybe I'll do later list. So I'm going to go in here and kind of take a look around at the code I've implemented so far. And what I'd come in here to do was to implement the queen class. So I got rid of the king class, which is done, so I'm not going to keep that around. And I know that I want to implement queen going into today, but I'm also going to put in here and say, let's maybe at some point start moving towards a more kind of production setting where you're separating and having a better sense of what goes where instead of just having everything in the test project. But I'm not sure exactly at what point I'll do this, but since I've already written this code, I know it's not going to be in this video. Also, I apologize in advance if there's anything kind of weird going on with the audio. I recently got a new computer, so this is my first time doing a recording on this machine, and I don't have all my default volume levels and everything set up, so I tried to do my best to get situated here, but we'll see how it goes. So what I'm doing here to get back to the actual code is I'm creating a class called Queen Test, which I'm just going to have the same kind of approach here that I've had with all of the rest of the pieces that I've implemented so far. So it's time to define the queen and then to implement the get moves from. And when it comes to a queen, I'm going to kind of reference king here because I have so the king is sort of the queen's set of movement, but the queen can do it to every extension of the board. The king can only do it once in either direction. So there is certainly kind of a synergy between these two pieces in terms of the queen just being the king, but with more range. So that's why I'm going to be referring heavily to the king class as I do this. There was a bit of fumbling here. I actually recorded this screen captured this sort of about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks ago. It's a little fuzzier in my memory, but I do seem to recall that there were a number of distractions, interruptions while I was doing this. So maybe you'll get sort of a taste of real world coding in that sense, where often you're not just kind of quietly hammering away at the code base. So there's a bit of floundering and sort of pauses in this particular episode more than maybe in some others. But you see the same basic pattern here. I'm going to write a test that doesn't compile because I don't have the class. Then I'm going to declare the class, and I'm going to kind of take it from there with the back and forth. So what I'm doing here is reasoning that the tests that I've written for king, all of those should be the same for queen. So queen should pass in terms of get moves from on anything that king passes for, because that's just one of the queen's ranges of moves. So I'm going to say that I want to get the queen's set of moves, and I want to verify, borrowing from what I had defined for the king, I want to verify that the queen can also move to this space. So here, now that I've kind of gotten into the rhythm of the inheritance hierarchy that I have, the easiest way to actually get this to compile isn't to go and type get moves from, it's to implement the abstract class. As you can see, that went a lot quicker than typing out that whole method signature. So going back and once again referring to the king test class, and as you can see, I try to be somewhat of a purist about this. I'm not going to go and copy and paste those methods. I just find that as much as it seems like it saves you time, it costs you time in the long run with mistakes. So aside from copying and pasting member names, I generally don't copy and paste things wholesale. There are always exceptions. You'll probably catch me doing it at one point, and then, I'll be a hypocrite. So I'll point out up front that every now and then you will find yourself doing something like that. But I try not to do it, and I think I do a pretty good job. So as per the pattern here that I've followed in the past, I'm going to start off just kind of hard coding this particular coordinate, and then let the test-driven development take me into doing something less obtuse in order to make this happen. So now I'm going to follow the same declaration pattern. I'm going to feel the pain of this duplication of the things I'm typing out that will drive me to refactor, probably around the start of the third test if I know myself, that's when it usually seems to happen. And I'm going to make the same assertion as in the king class that we should be able to go diagonally over one and up one. So that fails. Now, in order to make this pass, I'm thinking that the simplest thing to do... Oh, and yes, I seem to... when I was typing this, all of this x equals and y equals got me to thinking just maybe at some point I should define a board coordinate equals method, and that might actually make life easier. I didn't think it through a whole lot at the time. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, but it's worth noting at least to take a look at. That might be a little more elegant than all of this any and then specifying both coordinates, where I could just say any board coordinate equal to such and such. So here I am in the king class, and what I'm going to look to do, I have these concepts that I had already pulled up, get radial diagonal and get radial adjacent. That's already in the base class, but I'm wondering if I can't just pull this whole logic up, or this whole piece of logic up into the base class, so that the king and the queen are both using the exact same logic, and we're going to maybe pass an argument of 1 to the king versus board size to the queen or something like that. So what I'm doing is I'm extracting a method here called get all radial moves from, and then I'm going to pull this up to the base class. So yeah, we'll pull it up here. And I think, yeah, all tests are still passing. So this is just a bit of simple kind of wrapping around what I've been doing here. But the goal here now is that I'm going to go and I'm going to call this from the queen class. So I'm going to say get all radial moves from, and I'm going to describe my starting location. And that's good. You know, I'm still passing. So, hey, it looks like my hypothesis worked. So now it's time to start expanding out. So far, I could have just used king in here, and that would have made the test pass too. But what we need to do here at this point, and exactly as I predicted, it's right when I'm about to feel the pain of typing all this stuff again that I do the refactor. For whatever reason, I never remember to do the refactor on the test class until I'm about to type it out in the third test rather than right after the second test. I must get so excited that the tests are passing or something that it just doesn't occur to me. So I'm doing this bit of housekeeping here, and I'm going to get rid of this little bit of duplication, and I'm going to go towards using target. And then I will move on. And I think maybe also here I define default board size. I do not recall off the top. Looks like that's what I'm going to do. Yeah, sure enough, I don't like this magic number in here, so as long as I am doing this refactoring anyway, I'm just going to take it out to make it a little more readable and paste in the default board size. So there, as I've said, it's not that I never use copy and paste. This seems like a decent use case for it. It's no logic. It's just a name to make sure I don't fat finger anything. So now it's time to perhaps move onward and, yes, I do believe I am defining, because I know I'm going to do a good bit of testing from the board coordinate position 1, 1. I believe I go here to define moves from 1, 1. And I'm going to initialize that in the before each test method. As you can see, I'm referring heavily to what I did in the king class. So I'm going to initialize this and then just make these assertions all that much more simpler. So now the one I'm going to type in terms of returns 3, 3 for 1, 1. It's going to be a very simple assert, very little typing, and I have this kind of paradigm here where I can say, I can make all kinds of quick assertions about where the queen should be able to get to from position 1, 1. But first, I'm going to go back and I'm going to make these into one-line assertions by getting rid of this whole concept, and in the process eliminating a bit of duplication, and in my opinion not really sacrificing any readability. So I'm doing a bit of yak shaving here, I guess, but I think towards a good end, which is to be able to type these one-line asserts that are pretty easy to read and pretty easy to reason about. So now I get to bear the fruits of this labor, and I'm just going to say that moves from 1-1 should have a board coordinate return where the x and y values are each equal to 3. You can picture this along the board. It's the queen moving diagonally 2 spaces from the bottom left corner of the board. So I see now that that doesn't work, so what do I have to do to go make this pass? I know. I will just make the coordinate that I'm passing in a parameter. So in the case of king, I pass in 1. In the case of queen, I'm going to pass in board size. And so I fully expected that to work. And now what you're going to get to see here is me floundering a bit. It had been, probably a week or so since, oops, there was a typo, but I got to tell you that's not why it stays red. In fact, now everything goes red, and this is kind of weird, so I get confused because, as I was starting to say, it had been about a week since, or maybe a little more since I had coded the last segment, and I had kind of forgotten exactly how these methods work. So what you're seeing here is, if you could actually get a video camera out, I was kind of squinting at the screen and trying to figure out why this didn't work exactly. And there didn't seem to be any good explanation for this in my mind. So here's something I do troubleshooting-wise. Okay, I got a bunch of red tests. I don't know what's going on. So really quickly, I'm going to go back to where everything is green, except for the test that I just wrote, because I don't want to be failing to make my new test pass and introducing regressions. I'm clearly, if that's happening, then there's clearly something wrong, and I need to go back to the drawing board. Generally speaking, what you're looking for is to either have regressions and have the new thing pass, and then you address those regressions, or you have the new thing maybe still failing, but you don't have any regressions. I mean, ideally, you want everything passing, but I'm saying you don't want to introduce two possible sets of issues. One where there's regressions, and two where you're making you're not making the new thing pass. So here, I'm getting myself into these situations where now either one or the other is passing as I kind of flail around and figuring out what to do here. And I'm at sort of a loss as to what exactly the problem is. At least I was when I was writing this. So I'm literally now kind of staring at the screen and being very confused. Why is this parameter I'm passing in not taking care of this? And silly as it sounds, you've probably figured out why by now, but at this point I hadn't actually looked at what these get radial methods were doing. I had an image in my mind of what they were doing. And so I'm doing all these kind of crazy things to figure it out and flailing around and looking silly. And then it was only when I actually looked at these methods and saw, oh, I see. They are not getting all of the moves up to and including the distance parameter. They're just getting all the moves at exactly the distance parameter. So I only, when I was coding, figured this out just now as you're watching. So there was an aha moment. Oh, of course, this couldn't possibly work because when I pass in 2, I'm getting all the radial moves 2 away, not all the radial moves 1 and 2 away. So that cleared up that mystery, and now it's just a matter of, oh, okay, I need to have get all radial moves from, aggregate these sets of things that are going to be returned. And so that threw sort of a wrench in the works, because now I've got this get all radial moves from, and in order to make things pass here, I'm looking at kind of the concept of having this method do an abstraction that's not quite the same as the other ones. There's a bit of false advertising going on, and you can see I'm still flailing with this method a bit and trying to understand what on earth is going on here. That's kind of what happens when your code doesn't line up with your expectations. You get kind of out of sync, as I did here. Oops. Now I've got to play with this, and yeah, I don't want to do distance. I want to actually go over the loop counter, and now everything's green. But now I have this interesting problem that I'd like to solve where if you actually look at these methods names, one is get all the radial adjacents, one is get all the radial diagonals, and then I have one that's both. But the one that's both is sort of a problem that I'm going to want to come back to later, because the one that's both is getting all the is aggregating all the moves, but the one or the others are not. So that's kind of a principle of least surprise violation. Why is one that just combines diagonal and adjacent actually behaving differently in terms of aggregation? So that's something I'm going to have to solve. But for right now, I'm going in here and I want to solve the problem more immediately of not returning nonsensical board coordinates. So here on the get all radial moves from in the queen, I want to specify that I'm only going to get valid moves. Arguably, I could move the selection of only valid moves up into the base class, because kind of conceivably it seems strange that I would want any piece to move off the board, but for now I'm just going to kind of leave that alone. So in here, I'm giving this a more clear and descriptive name, moves within a board size. And I'm going to get all the moves within a board size of the starting position. Then I'm going to filter it and say, well, I only want the moves that are actually valid. So next up, I'm kind of looking at this method. Now I feel good, because it sure appears as though the queen should be doing what's proper for the queen to do. So now I'm in a position where I might want to refactor and start to think about, are my abstractions making sense? So get all radial moves from. At the very least, this probably needs a different name. And if memory serves, I think what I would have wanted to do, what I'd want to do now, is to kind of separate the concept of aggregation from what's actually going on here. So I was kind of pondering here, I think, what to do, what to name things. So get all radial moves is going to aggregate, or I'm sorry, is going to combine radial diagonal and radial adjacent. But what I really want to do is also have a kind of a separation for this concept of aggregating. So get radial adjacent from inclusive. There we go. I have the same taste as myself. I remembered what I wanted to do here. So I want to define for each of these methods, I want to define the concept of inclusive. In get all radial moves from, if I want that to be inclusive, I should be calling these individual inclusive ones. So what I'm actually going to do here is have this logic where I iterate over the moves up to and including the distance value. And I want to do that for both get radial diagonal and get radial adjacent. So now, if memory serves, I think I wasn't a huge fan of this loop concept. So I really love the link semantics. I love that it's declarative and not procedural in nature. So I tend to heavily favor this, you'll notice, as you watch me code, rather than having control flow statements and loops and such. I tend to favor link pretty heavily. I find it to be more expressive and more readable, and I don't really like dictating how exactly to loop and increment and all that. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to do a select many, and I'm going to define a range of numbers from 1 up through the distance, and then I'm going to select many is a way of smashing groups together into a, so if you have a set of enumerables being returned that you want to combine, that's what I'm going to do, since get radial adjacent from is going to return several board coordinates. So now I'm going to take this prototype I've made, and I'm going to apply the same reasoning, and I'm going to do it for get radial diagonal from. So now you can see what I'm doing is I'm defining these companion methods. So the logic for actually what it means to be radial diagonal is in this get radial diagonal from. The logic of whether you want to get them individually versus inclusively is going to be here in another method where, in essence, I type out the same kind of logic, and it's easier once I have this prototype to refer to. Now I'm just going to kind of go through it quickly, and life will be good. So now once I have these two methods in place, I'm going to be able to call the radial diagonal inclusive and radial adjacent inclusive as get all radial moves from. And I think I probably ought to define the same kind of single versus aggregated concept for get all radial moves. I don't remember if I did that or not, so I'm going to discover that along with you as I'm watching myself from a couple weeks ago type this out. So at the very least, I can now get rid of this looping logic in here and just say that I want to return get radial diagonal from inclusive, and I'm probably going to want to union that with get radial diagonal from adjacent. And this is a good time. So I've done a good bit of coding here. This is, a nice refactoring. Sometimes you'll do more. I usually try not to do massive refactorings or anything, but it is a big comfort to have all these tests when you're doing a refactoring. So now I'll see very quickly if what I was doing made sense, if kind of the fruits of my labors pay off here. So, hey, there we go. I don't even have to delete the old stuff. I'm still green. That was unreachable code. I deleted anyway. So that worked. And then I'm going to correct a spelling mistake here. Get all radial moves from is now using these new things that we've defined. Now, looking at my marker in the video as I'm recording, it appears that I'm almost out of time with this. So I don't think I did that separate aggregation for the combination yet. That's something I should probably do in the future. I'm going to mark queen as done, and then I'm going to insert something here that I want to do in the cell below the queen class, and I want to say that I want to move queen to its own class, which I actually didn't remember to do. So that's it. Until next time.